Welcome to The Explainer. We hear constantly about artificial intelligence right now. The chatbots writing our emails, the algorithms generating mind-bending art. But today, we're actually going under the hood. We are diving into the gritty, physical reality of the AI boom. Because behind every single piece of that smart software is a massive, incredibly complex machine that is pushing the absolute physical boundaries of modern engineering. Let's kick things off with a number that is just mind-boggling. $100 billion. According to recent industry reports, this is the estimated cost of a single proposed data center project currently being planned by Microsoft and OpenAI. To put that into perspective, that is expected to be 100 times more costly than some of the absolute largest data centers operating today. We are witnessing this massive tectonic shift in focus toward physical infrastructure, and the sheer scale of the capital being deployed is almost hard to wrap your head around.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The $100 billion AI supercomputer. 2. NVIDIA's next-gen hardware engine. 3. Hitting the thermal wall. And finally 4. The liquid cooling race.
Section 1. The $100 billion AI supercomputer.
So, the crown jewel of this whole Microsoft and OpenAI partnership is a proposed US-based supercomputer known as Stargate. Now, Stargate is actually the fifth phase of a highly ambitious five-phase plan, and they're looking at an expected launch around 2028. Total expenses for this master plan, they could easily exceed $115 billion. Just to anchor that for a second, this expenditure would more than triple what Microsoft spent in its entirety last year on capital spending for servers, buildings, and equipment combined. It is a completely monumental physical undertaking.
Now, you might be wondering, where exactly does a budget like that go? Well, a massive chunk of it goes directly to the hardware, specifically the chips. NVIDIA's latest Blackwell B200 AI chip is priced anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 per unit. When you consider that you need tens or realistically hundreds of thousands of these chips for a single supercomputer, well, suddenly that $100 billion price tag starts to make a whole lot of sense.
In the timelines of these major tech players, they're moving in total lockstep. It's really fascinating. In 2026, Microsoft aims to launch its Phase 4 supercomputer, right as NVIDIA rolls out its Rubin architecture. By 2027, Rubin Ultra paves the way for Microsoft's colossal Stargate in 2028. And looking even further ahead to 2030, NVIDIA's Feynman architecture is already on the drafting table. Basically, the hardware is entirely dictating the pace of the software right now.
Section 2. NVIDIA's next-gen hardware engine.
So looking at those upcoming GPU generations from 2026 to 2030, Rubin Ultra, and Feynman, we have to realize these are not just slight incremental upgrades. They represent a fundamental leap in processing power. These GPUs are going to sit inside massive AI workstations and rack-mount servers, creating what the industry calls high-density server racks. Essentially, this means packing an absolutely astonishing amount of computational power into a very tight physical footprint, just to minimize the literal distance that data has to travel.
But of course, that immense computational density comes with a staggering energy cost. According to reports from the International Energy Agency, global data center electricity use is forecast to more than double by 2030, reaching roughly 945 terawatt-hours. Just to give you a sense of scale for a number that huge, that will surpass the entire annual energy consumption of the entire nation of Japan. These high-density racks are incredibly power-hungry, and it's completely changing how data centers have to be built and operated moving forward.
Which brings us to Section 3, hitting the thermal wall.
So, what exactly is the thermal wall? Well, it is the physical tipping point where conventional air cooling systems, the giant fans we've relied on for decades, simply fail. These high-density servers generate so much extreme heat that blowing air just cannot move the thermal energy fast enough to keep these machines from literally melting down. In the industry, they are feeling this pressure right now. Johan Nylarud, the chief strategy officer at Kazna Data Centers, perfectly summed it up by noting the, quote, unprecedented demand for data center capacity worldwide. Because of this insane demand, data center vacancy rates in places like Europe have actually plummeted below 10%. So we have the situation where demand is vastly outstripping the infrastructure, and a sheer lack of reliable power and cooling is becoming a massive constraint on global AI expansion. So what's the solution? It all comes down to basic physics, and it's highlighted by this punchy little stat, 3,500. Liquid cooling actually has a heat transfer rate up to 3,500 times greater than traditional air-based methods, depending on the water volume.
In practice, it is roughly 25 times more efficient at cooling the apparatus overall. When air fails, liquid is basically the only physical substance capable of absorbing and removing this much thermal energy quickly enough.
Let's break down the math for a second, because it really makes this shift completely unavoidable. Traditional air-cooled racks, they max out at around 15 to 25 kilowatts of power. But modern AI racks, they're already hitting 85 kilowatts today, and projections show them demanding up to 250 kilowatts very, very soon. So it is physically impossible for air to cool the next generation of AI. Liquid cooling is no longer just a nice option. It is totally mandatory.
And that leads us to our final stretch, Section 4, the liquid cooling race.
Goldman Sachs has put out a forecast on this, and the expected adoption rate is just staggering. Back in 2024, liquid-cooled servers made up just 15% of the market. By 2025, they project 54%, and by 2026, a massive 76%. We are quite literally watching a total architectural transformation unfold in just 2 to 3 years. The underlying plumbing of the entire global cloud is being completely ripped up and redesigned.
Now, there is a fascinating financial reality driving this, which we call the 40 kilowatt tipping point. You might think installing all this liquid cooling is ridiculously expensive up front, and yeah, it is. But once a server rack crosses that 40 kilowatt threshold, it actually starts saving money. Liquid systems eliminate the need for that massive, bulky air conditioning infrastructure we used to use, which saves both physical data center space and overall cooling capital expenditure.
But actually getting there? Not so easy. There are 3 major bottlenecks holding back this whole transition. First up, operators have to master precision energy management just to avoid wasting precious power. Second, they need high-density power supply units, or PSUs, and these cost 2 to 3 times more than traditional units. Third, the industry desperately needs to expand the supply of quick disconnect couplings, or QDCs, which are these specialized fittings that are absolutely essential to making liquid systems work safely. And right now, the supply chains for these specific components are incredibly fragile.
And that fragility is creating a genuinely fascinating geopolitical supply chain dynamic. Our sources report that currently, Western suppliers like Staubli and Eaton dominate the production of those vital QDCs, and globally there are only 4 NVIDIA-certified PSU suppliers. However, Chinese firms like NVIDIA are scaling up rapidly, and they're backed by strict domestic regulatory incentives for energy efficiency. Because of that, the Chinese data center liquid cooling market is forecast to grow at an incredible 27% annually. So what we're seeing is a major global parallel effort to secure these totally critical supply chains.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question as we wrap up this explainer: who will win the race to cool the future of AI? Because the reality is, whoever can manufacture the physical couplings, the advanced power supplies, and master that precision liquid thermodynamics the fastest, they aren't just going to control the cooling, they are going to control the very pace at which global artificial intelligence can actually advance. Thank you so much for joining me to look under the hood today, and definitely keep your eyes on the